You are listening to the podcast When Life Gives You Lemons, presented by me, Emma Levy. Having worked with elite athletes for most of my career, it's always intrigued me that a significant number of high-performing individuals have encountered some form of adversity earlier in their lifetime. My fascination into this grew when I had my own brush with adversity, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in May 2020, in the midst of the global pandemic at the age of only 36. During this period, I questioned whether it was my positive mindset or maybe something deeper, which enabled me to bounce back and to train and compete for a triathlon just 1 month following completion of all active cancer treatment. The goal of this podcast is to explore this concept further by meeting a variety of high-performing individuals who have experienced adversity but who have come back stronger. Today I'm welcoming Marcus Smith to the podcast. Marcus is an extreme athlete, motivational speaker, coach and entrepreneur. Having come from a background of professional rugby, he then in 2010 moved to CrossFit and endurance challenges, and over the years he has participated in a multitude of extraordinary ultra and extreme events. He is the owner of Inner Fight, a gym in Dubai, and he has a podcast with the same name. In 2018, Marcus faced a near-death experience when he was hit by a truck whilst out on a bike. This traumatic experience allowed Marcus to gain a new perspective on life, and 9 months following that incident, he completed an epic challenge of completing 30 marathons in 30 days. He now shares his passion for life and his positive mindset with others through coaching, motivational speaking and podcasting. There's so much I wanted to discuss with Marcus, so let's get stuck in. Marcus, thank you for joining us today. It is really great to finally meet you. I would have loved to somehow engineered a trip to sunny Dubai, but unfortunately the budget of When Life Gives You Lemons doesn't quite allow that at the moment.
Not yet. It's coming.
Exactly.
I believe in you, Emma.
Thank you. I believe in myself as well. I'm going to start with a really, really broad question. Tell us, who is Marcus Smith and how did you get to where you are today?
Wow. You said we only have an hour,
Yeah.
right? I love it. I love it when you send me all these questions and that one isn't even in it. Anyway, I'll stop the bluff. Mate, it's interesting. It's a really great question, the who am I, right? And through all of my coaching and I guess through my life experiences, I ask people that often and people struggle with it. I spend a lot of time making notes on it and refining it. But essentially, I'm the same as anyone else. I'm a human being made up of skin, bones, some organs, some damaged muscles, some tired bones. And I'm a human being that is trying to live in a way that when I wake up every morning, someone put it actually this morning, which I really like, which resonated with me a lot. I feel light. And that for me is happiness. So I'm just trying to live in a way, coach people in a way that I can wake up every morning excited about what I'm going to do that day. And I think I'm a good person, Emma, but lots of people might say I'm not. But I think we can all be good to each other. I'm trying to be as good as I can be. Life does give you lemons. Life is a roller coaster. And I want to go to bed at night smiling. I always speak to Holly, my wife, over dinner. And as I go to bed, before I ask her what's for dinner tomorrow night, I always spend a moment reflecting on the way the day went and what I'm excited about tomorrow. So I think often because, and this might resonate with you because of what you've been through and what you've done, people often come and say, oh, you've got, I don't know. I think superpowers is probably a little bit egotistical, but you're a little bit different. But at the end of the day, mate, I'm exactly the same as many other people. I'm a human being stood up in a load of skin and bones and stuff. And I wake up every morning and I make choices the same as a lot of people have to make. So that's really who I am, I think, which to some people might sound a little bit woo-woo, but that's the way it is.
We like woo-woo. So how did you become that person? Were you always that person when you were playing rugby, or has it been a transition as you've come from the rugby into the more kind of endurance world?
That's a brilliant question. And to be honest with you, you mentioned it in the introduction. In 2018, I had quite an interesting encounter with a truck when I was on my bike. And of course, my programming until that time and for a certain amount of time after that had been what it was. And we're sort of somewhere you could argue 70 to 80% programmed by our subconscious. We don't actually really know what's going on. And I'd been programmed in a certain way. And I think my crash made me look at things a little bit different. And of course, people ask me, do you think this will change you? And I was like, no, I'm the same person I was yesterday. But mate, we're just over 5 years on now, and I'm very different. Maybe that's age. Maybe this is just the way it's meant to be. I believe everything is really the way it's meant to be until you make it different. And then that's the way it's meant to be, because if it was meant to be different, then it would be different. And that might sound a little bit conflicting to some people, but that's just the way I see it. So I was who I was when I was playing rugby, which if I look back on it and be brutally honest with you, Emma, I was a very stereotypical rugby player, probably overly arrogant, very good at drinking 10 pints very fast and then taking all my clothes off and running around bars. And, I don't think I'm proud of the arrogance, but I'm quite proud of the 10 pints and the running around naked. I think that's that's okay. But yeah, I think we were very different back then and to what we are now. Was I living the life I wanted to live back then? Even when I had my crash, I was absolutely living the life I wanted to live. And now I'm living the life I want to live now. So I think we're always changing. The world, society wants us to have a linear path. And I know it's a little bit cliched, but life's not linear. There's ups, downs. One day you're working towards something, and the next day in that year, 2018, I was going to try and set a world record, and then the next minute I'm dead, literally, well, not literally, but I was dying on the side of the road with no medical care around. So
tell us a bit more about that. Tell us more about that crash. What actually happened?
It was my fault, 50% of it, and you have to own these things. I think there's a lack of ownership in the world at the moment, and I've owned this since the day that it happened. I was undertaking a truck, and I didn't realize that we drive on the right hand side over here, and I was undertaking them. And the reason why the truck had slowed down is because it wanted to turn right into a blind entrance, and it didn't see me in its wing mirror, and it just hit like that and then pushed me onto a brick wall, and I hit it at 54 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
And it doesn't end well, and it's interesting because bones break very, very easily at those speeds. And the good thing about bones, and you definitely resonate with this, bones are not really a massive issue. However, organs and soft tissue causes a lot bigger issues. So the fact that I'd broken 7 ribs and shattered my scapula was not a problem, but the fact that my left lung, I got what they call a lung hemothorax, which essentially your lung kind of bursts like a balloon, if you want, and that makes breathing difficult, and without breath there's no life. So yeah, it was super interesting, mate, and every time I talk about it, every time I think about it, every time I write about it, I learn more from it. And there was about 2 hours before I got medical attention. I was where I like to be. I was in the middle of the mountains, and it takes ambulances a long time to get to places like that.
And were you alone, or were you with anyone?
I wasn't alone. And this is where, I might freak you out a few times during this chat, but I'll freak you out now. There was with me were 2 airline pilots and a former professional cyclist. So I was literally with the best people. Like, the only thing that was missing was there was no ambulance close by. So they helped me. They knew what to do in these situations, but at the end of the day, they couldn't put oxygen into my body. But I and this happened on the 10th of February, 2018. And if you if you're listening, take a minute and go back to my Instagram. It's a long way back. I post a lot. You'll have to scroll all the way back. But on the 9th of February, 2018, I put a post up and some text on the post, which I wrote all by myself, which says everything happens for a reason.
Wow. Do you still believe that then?
Yeah, I really do, and I think like reflecting on it, I guess, back in those days, you could kind of pick any cliche from wherever and stick it on Instagram and no one could call you out. And now it's so cheesy, but I really do, mate. I just, I heard something on a podcast actually during lockdown, and, this guy said things happen the way they happen and they couldn't happen any other way because they didn't, so it's brutal, mate. And you've probably seen it through what you've been through. It's very, very, very hard in the moment to understand that and actually to connect the dots. And this is where I think our biggest duel with immediate gratification is, because we want to connect the dots in the moment. When you were diagnosed, you're like, why me? Why now? What's this? What's that? What's going to happen? And I went through exactly the same things. Like, life was totally uncertain for me for a number of hours into days, really.
Yeah. And
you sort of sit there and you try and put in your mind this rational thinking, well, everything happens for a reason and life's not linear and all these cliches. And you need to create that space to actually calculate what's happened and process what's happened. And that also takes a disproportionate amount of energy and I think hard work as well. And I mean, it's difficult because whose experience was more traumatic, mine or yours? We always get in these sort of conversations.
I always say there's no hierarchy in trauma. Everyone's trauma is as important to them as to others, basically.
Well, that's it, mate. That's exactly true. But if we say, all trauma was created equally, then we agree on that. However, the processing of all trauma was not created equally. And it could take, if you'd have gone through exactly what I went through, you could recover faster or slower. And if I'd have gone through what you went through, I could have recovered faster or slower. And depending on how I worked through it. And I think that's really important for people is, and this is a lot based, I think it really comes from sort of ancient meditation and, allowing thoughts to come and just allowing them to sit out here in space somewhere and not having to act on things. But we're increasingly taught by society to act on things. And I don't think that's right. I think we need time.
Yeah, well, it's the processing of that trauma and how that coincides with mindset. That was one of my biggest motivations for this podcast, actually. And so, talking to people who have been through trauma and examining how they've processed that and how they've moved forward to where they are today, I find really very fascinating. Especially, the mindset thing. If we kind of just jump to mindset now, the importance of mindset. And I'll give you an example here based on my experiences. When I was going through my cancer treatment, and I kept exercising the whole way through. So I was, running when I could and going to the gym, etc. And I remember being out for a run with a friend. This was, a few days after my chemo treatment. And we get back to her house to stretch. And suddenly I get this epic nosebleed. I'm hit with this kind of wave of vertigo. So I'm lying on the floor, unable to move. And I'm kind of just that's all right. It's just because I'm going through chemo and I've just been for a run. I'm fine, it's going to pass. And I remember she was basically horrified.
I can imagine.
And I think I remember at that moment kind of thinking about the importance of mindset. And that's what I'm so I'm so interested in analysing and questioning people like you. What's your thoughts on mindset? And how can we control it? How can we teach that?
I think we can absolutely teach people mindset. However, it's like anything. We have to want to learn. And there's the difference. I think most things, well, if you look at the way humans are, we're born with certain things, whether they're passed down to us, however all of that works. And, that's a whole topic, but we're very good at learning things. We weren't born with the ability to walk. We were born with the tools to be able to walk, and then we practiced it a lot. We were all born with a brain, and that's the mindset. So I think the problem goes back to a little bit what I said when we're talking about recovery or processing things, is that it's incredibly hard and can take some time. We're 5 years on, and guaranteed, and maybe I'll let you know in one day or maybe in 1 year what my takeaway, what my therapy is from talking to you today about my crash. There'll be something, and it'll just come to me. So yeah, you can, but you need to want to learn, and you need to understand the role that mindset plays. And if you haven't been exposed to that for a number of years, if you pick someone up who's 30 years old and they haven't been exposed to the importance of mindset in any area of life, be it sports performance, relationship performance, or work performance, they're going to struggle. And especially if they don't want to change, if they don't want to leverage it. But mindset's huge. And it's really how I built my training business, and why our brand name is called Inner Fight, because I realized very early that it was not just about the sets and the reps,
Yeah.
It's so much different to that, and when I started having conversations with people in 2005 and 2006, we were playing around with CrossFit and just working out in a different way. And, I was as bored as everyone else with, going to the gym and doing some dips, some pull-ups, some bench press, rarely doing back squats, but then doing a couple of deadlifts, biceps, triceps, and leaving. I was like, this isn't what it's all supposed to be.
Yeah.
I was like, the mind is the weapon here. And, when we start to, and a lot of this it's the reason why people struggle with it is because it's a lot harder to measure. If you're Usain Bolt, you can run the 100 meters in 9 seconds, point whatever, super fast, very impressive, very measurable. And if I change this on your Lycra, I've proven this in a wind tunnel that this goes point da. Sweet. How do I measure the conversation you have with the fuel attendant at the petrol pump? How do I measure that? And how do I measure the impact that will have on you?
Yeah.
Now, I actually run that with some clients. It's one of my favorite tools. I'm like, everyone fills their car up. I'm like, tell me what that interaction was like with the person in the fuel station, what you took from them, what you gave from them, because everything is energy. So what's actually going on there, and how does that process in your mind? And some people get back, and this is what I'm really talking about for people that think I'm absolutely nuts. What I'm actually talking about is, how does it affect you positively or negatively if the person at the fuel station is polite to you or not polite to you? You'll carry that into your car, and you'll carry that into your life, into your performance in various areas of life.
Yeah. And
we're doing it all the time, but for the most part, we're doing it subconsciously. We have no awareness around it.
So you think we should become more aware about all the interactions in our day, and how that affects our mind, and then how that affects our mind is going to affect our body, because our mind and body are so interrelated, basically.
100%. And that's how I define happiness. Happiness is a heightened state of awareness. That's all it is, in my opinion. Yeah. And we could argue the whole day.
Yeah.
But, that's a lot of people like, I want to be happy. And you talk about what happiness is. And for some people, it's fast cars. Others, it's hot cups of coffee. Others, it's oceans views, all of these nice, beautiful things and stuff. But what are all those things? All those things are actually for me, all those things are a heightened state of awareness. And it's going to be different for everyone. But self-awareness is huge. And, it's not, I don't think it's a surprise, Emma, that we don't have it, because we're often told, like, if you look at a life cycle of a human being, we're told what to do. We're asked what we want to become. And then we're told we should become something different. And then we go to work, and then we get told how to do something. And we're always getting told. So it's like, it's okay if you're 40 years old and you turn around and go, who the fuck am I? Because, like you've been told for 40 years, but you might not agree with it.
Yeah. So do you think we should have more choice from the very beginning?
That's a good question. And it's a very dangerous one. I think we should be taught about self-awareness, and we should be, listen, I don't have children, but I hear a lot about the education system these days. And I don't remember a lot of what I was taught at school, which is a problem. But I remember a lot of the interactions I had at school. So what does that say? That says what the skills that I'm deploying in my life now are not the ones that were written up on a whiteboard. They're the interactions that I maybe had, and what I put under the frame of more life skills. And life skills is teaching people to be aware.
Yeah.
When do you get taught like how to, like, basic manners? Is that up to our parents? Is that up to school? And does the school get measured on manners, or does it get measured on how you can do your multiplication? It gets measured on multiplication. And what do the schools want? They want high ranking. So you've got a load of brats in a school with like 9s or whatever they call them. Like, I don't know why they just went past A stars. I was like, A stars is more than enough. Now they call them 9s. I hear
exactly. I don't understand.
I digress.
Yeah, I do know. So I've got children at school, and I do know, I think they are getting better at teaching emotional intelligence, 100%. But how much of that is kind of just a tick box exercise? I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then it's also, and maybe you've got more thoughts about it, like as a parent, like, and this is the flip side of it. Like, if we are really bullish on emotional intelligence education, when do we do it? When's the right time? When did I am I emotionally aware? Someone might be listening and going, this guy's an absolute idiot. He's got no idea what he's talking about. But when do we give it to them? Because I guess as a parent, we want our children to do well, and we want them to excel in things that either they choose, or if we're living vicariously through them, which is, again, quite a nice problem. But, so what's the point, and what's the point that maybe slows them down in the trajectory that we dreamed about for them? And to be honest with you, mate, that's probably why I'm not a parent, because I'd be so bad at it.
Do you know Matthew Syed, the author?
Yes.
So he's written a children's book actually on fixed mindset and growth mindset. Right. So again, I think, there are more books like that available to kids, and I have started reading that with my children. But, even for my 10-year-old, still struggles to grasp the concept a little bit. So, but in my opinion, if you kind of just give them all the information as young as you can, and then they've got it somewhere in there, that when it's appropriate, he might find the right advice. But in terms of teaching,
it's tricky.
It's really
super tricky.
I think it's more difficult to train their mind than their body. But
I agree.
Yeah.
200%. But that's the biggest thing as well, is that it's very easy for a very short time period to train someone's body, and they will get, depending on what they do, they could get some really good results in that short time period. However, if we go back to what I said at the start, I personally want to wake up every morning feeling light, feeling energized, feeling excited about the day. That's quite long term. So what forces is probably a bit aggressive, but what enables long-term physical training is having the right mindset. And it's the whole equation, which was, I think it was like on every podcast about 6 months ago, what comes first, motivation or discipline? And what is it, Jocko Wilkin, discipline eats motivation for breakfast. All this crap. Anyway, you get what I'm saying.
I mean, they come together, I think. But
I don't know. No. I'm actually, again, I'm sounding so cheesy, but I think discipline is the winner. And
really?
If I think back, I do, mate. And I think, not that I had the best education, but I think back to my education, we never ever spoke about goals in school. Like, and I don't know if you think the same, but discipline was such a key part of school. but it was never, goals sort of came after your university or during university, I guess.
Yeah. But I struggle to think, how can you be disciplined if you don't have the motivation? So you need the motivation of a goal, in my
Yeah.
opinion, to maintain disciplined.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and the perception of what a goal is super important, because when you say goals to people, normally it's like, 100-kilo deadlift or a 4-hour marathon, or stuff like that. And I mean, again, through what you've been through, sometimes a goal could literally be to get off the bed that day.
Yeah.
Like, if you're feeling pretty shit, that's and I remember one guy, one of the early guys that I sort of coached and mentored, he suffered super badly with depression, and one of his goals for a number of weeks, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, was the only thing he had to do on a particular day was to floss his teeth. That was it. There was nothing else, So yeah, I think the interpretation of goals I think that needs some refining. I'm sort of turning into a guy that hates society very fast, aren't I?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be very into setting goals as well. As a physio, I was always, we used to talk about SMART goals.
Yeah.
So if, for people listening that might not know, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, targeted goals. Now, through these conversations, my opinion on goals has actually changed, because sometimes I think there is I think if someone is too focused on a goal, they don't enjoy the present. And I think we need to be careful with that, because we need to be enjoying 100%. The present and the now. And if we're too focused on what's next, I think that there's worry that, we just go through life without enjoying the now.
So how do you therefore create the now?
Yeah, I agree. You have to set goals. No, I agree. So I think maybe within our SMART goal system, we need to enjoy the now,
Yeah.
like maybe SMART, enjoy now.
Yeah, it's mate, I don't know what the answer is either. It's always interesting to hear, because I agree with you. Like, we need to know where we're going, but we need to know how we get there. And if we're to create, quality time, if we're to create focus, that happens right now. And what really in my situation that we spoke about, what really did those world records mean when I was, left on the side of the road? Nothing.
Yeah,
exactly. Totally. But my whole life had been dedicated to them for a period of time. When I started training, and it was a lot of training. I was riding my bike 8 hours a day, most days. I was just so committed to this thing. But then suddenly, bang, it just goes. And then if I wasn't able to create that focus in the now to get the oxygen in, and it's like, if I can explain it in one way, it's like when you've been winded really badly times a few more times, you just can't breathe. Yeah. And so then those world records meant absolutely nothing, and they don't mean anything to me now, and I've never gone back to try and achieve that.
Yeah. So we've gone back to your accident. So let's talk about how did your perspective on life change following that accident, and what took you to the 30 marathons in 30 days challenge? Because that's mega, and that was only 8 months after. So I'm quite fascinated how you got there, and also why.
So where it actually started was, when I was released from ICU, I was moved to the main ward, and I pretty much knew that would be my home for a few days. I was there for about a week. And the endurance world is a strange one. People just send you things. Like, I've seen this and it's got your name on it. And a lot of the time I won't even read them, and sometimes I will, and then you just sort of put them wherever. Anyway, the second day that I was in the main ward, I remembered getting this message from a friend of mine, and it was actually a route across the island of Corsica, which was just about 200 kilometers, and just over 10,000 meters of elevation, a run. And I just got it up on my phone and I started reading it. And I'm quite like that. I'm pretty big on sort of gut feelings. If it feels right in your gut, just go for it, you know. And so I love all these guys these books that have come out now, don't trust your gut. It's like, whatever. I think I've got 4 books on the bookshelf over here, gut feelings. So anyway, I read it and I was like, got to do this. And I send a good friend of mine, he actually works with me now, and we spend a lot of time together, probably disproportionate. I sent it to him and I was like, you know, this is the date, we're going to do it. He's like, mate, you can't. At this point, I hadn't got off the hospital bed. And he's like, mate, just get well. And that was what started it. And I think, to really answer your question, when you are, and to go back to goals, when you are in the pursuit of goals, physical goals, challenges, having something maybe in the diary always kind of motivates you. That really helped me, because that was like, he was a school teacher at the time, and that was the 1st of July. We were going to start this run across Corsica, and I could somehow conceptualize that. I sat there and I still had an oxygen mask on because I couldn't breathe, and I had a pipe in my lungs, had a catheter in, and I was not in a good shape. But sometimes, and this is where I talk a lot with clients about sort of, and with my coaches about big picture coaching. Like, some people need a big picture to actually know that the next 6 months of life is going to be something, no matter what it is. And then we can kind of just park that. Like, I didn't need to know when we're starting. I didn't need to know the anal things about that. I didn't need to know what that training plan was. But then I could work back from that, and I could focus that the first time the physio came into the room, probably actually on that same day, and said, do you want to go for a walk? I was like, yes, I want to go for a walk. I actually looked at him and I went, are you kidding me? Like, I haven't moved for 4 or 5 days. And he goes, yeah, just sit up. And literally, mate, you know this, working in that area, like, you guys know exactly what you're doing. But to a patient who hasn't moved for 4 days, it's like, and he took 20 minutes to get me upright, and the whole thing. And it's just like, so that whole big picture thing helps me to get discipline, and therefore motivation, or motivation and therefore discipline, to work on a daily basis. And it sort of started this thing. And I had a fear of my bike. And to be honest with you, Emma, it took me about 3 years to get over that fear. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had no desire to ride a bike.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, well, I like running. I've always run. I ran a lot as a kid, and I put it all throughout my training when I was playing rugby, when I was doing CrossFit. And and as Holly would say, if Marcus likes something, he's all in. And she said it in the documentary they made about my crash. And the interviewer said, like, how would you describe him? And she's like, all in, like all in. So of course, mate, I start reading more books on running, and I picked up Dean Karnassus' book. He'd run 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states. Yeah. And then there's an initiative here in Dubai, which is fortunately not 50 days. It's only 30 days. And I was like, this just fits in. And I just thought to myself, I just wonder how this might go, and honestly, I didn't know if I could do it. I really didn't. I didn't feel insecure about it, but I wasn't super confident with it, Emma. I just thought, why not? I've hit rock bottom. Like, you can't walk, you can't breathe, you're pissing in a bag, it's a mess. The nurse is cleaning me, and you sort of, and I think that's one of the biggest things that since then I don't care. Like, I never used to care. People used to come to my gym, and they'd come without shoes to train in, and I'd be like, it doesn't matter, mate. Just, so it's pretty basic to start with, but that, when you're 40 years old, and the nurses, I've got 2 nurses cleaning me, and I'm just going, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Thank you. You're just like, and you've probably felt similar things with the people that have been taking care of you, and or that took you through chemotherapy and stuff, because they're amazing human beings, and you're not at rock bottom, but I was at rock bottom, mate, basically. And I was like, what let's see what happens. And, the cool thing with the initiative is that I managed to tie it into schools. And I was like, I was massively inspired by a friend, and he sent me a message, and it was so unemotional, but it was just, and these are good friends, right? Like they know when to send you emotional shit, and they know when to just smash you right between the face. And when I had my crash, this guy sent me a message. He goes, I heard you had a crash. I hope you're okay. What a fucking story. It's just like, I'm just like, wow. But yeah, and you just need these people in your life, and I was just like, so that was in the back of my mind. I was like, what a story.
Yeah.
This is a great story. And I didn't know who I was going to tell it to. I didn't know that 5 years on, we'd be having this conversation, and that hopefully one person or half a person that listens to this show might actually take some action. But, I was just like, this is it. And yeah, the snowball starts to snowball, and it was wild.
And so do you think you did it initially for yourself, or to tell the story, to inspire people? What was your primary goal with that?
My primary goal was a little bit of exploration of my own ability, because I genuinely didn't know if I could do it or not. And I thought to myself, well, if this is forcing me to explore my mental and physical and spiritual capacity as a human being, maybe that will motivate others to do the same. And that really resonated with me. I don't think I ever set out in my coaching career with the objective of, it wasn't always, it's not me and it's not them, it's us. I never see coaching as one party. Like one of my criteria for my coaching, I have 7 different points. One of them is that I can teach the person something, but the other is that they can teach me something, which is, it's crazy, but it's true. It's like, yeah, I'm going to charge you to teach me something. It's going to be really wicked, but it has to be this mutual relationship. And that's what my runs were. And then there was 2 other very clear-cut reasons, which I'm really proud to share. One of them was I knew I'd learn a lot, which would then help me to help others and myself more. And the final reason was really my family, was my wife, my mom, and my dad, because, it's pretty rough. The cyclist guy that was with me, he actually, I always wear, and I've always worn ID band on my wrist for these situations. And he got my wife's phone number from that, and he sent it to his wife, who called my wife and said, Marcus has had a crash. And I think about that a lot, even now. And back then I used to think about it even more, because Mignon called Holly up and said, Marcus has had a crash, pack a bag. Like, that was the context. And she goes, I'm coming to pick you up. And I'm like, wow, I've put her through this, and I think a lot about sort of the sacrifices and I know that my family don't see what they've done for me as sacrifices, because, and they're the same, that I think we don't, when it's people that we love, we never really see it as a sacrifice because we want to serve them. But I see it, they've done a lot for me, and I wanted to give them something that they were proud of. And I know that they'd have been super proud if I'd have just stayed home for 30 days.
Yeah, or just done one marathon.
Yeah, literally. Or just run with some kids and everything would have been good. But it really drives me, the thought of what they did for me, and maybe it's my way of giving back. I mean, that sort of famous book, The 5 Love Languages, we speak in different ways, and maybe the language that I'm talking and the language that they like to receive is different. Holly says that to me sometimes. She goes, you don't have to do this stuff. And I'm like, I know you don't think I have to, but I have to. Yeah. So yeah, they were the main drivers. And I think as well, Emma, I think there was a little bit of, I don't know. I think there was probably a little bit of ego in it. If I'm honest, it's like, I can show that this crash, it's not gonna knock me down. I'm gonna still do cool shit. And you know, that year 2018, I turned 40. You know, at the start of the year, I nearly lost my life. Then I run my marathons, and then I turned 40. I'm like, holy shit, does it get any better? Like,
Yeah,
it's just
amazing.
wild, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I can empathize. I made my goal of running my first triathlon sat on the chemo chair, and I remember the
Wow.
chemo nurses being like they thought I was mad.
Yeah.
They thought I was
Yeah.
mad, but I set that goal, sat wired up to chemo drugs, and now I'm kind of setting another challenge for my 40th year actually next year. It's not going to be as epic as your challenge, but
What is it? Are you allowed to tell me?
I am allowed to tell you, but it sounds so rubbish compared to your 30
No, it
marathons
doesn't.
in 30
No.
days. I am going to do a big London challenge every month of the year. So I'm going to do the London Marathon, the London Triathlon, the Swim Serpentine, like all the big halves. So basically it's got to be based in London because I'm from London. And I'm going to do Ride London and all the big London stuff. So I suppose for me it's a challenge because it's training for like a marathon and a bike ride and a swim,
Yeah.
It's all kind of like multi-sport stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I do, that's the reason why I asked you what's your why, because sometimes I do ask myself, what is my why? Why am I doing it? I kind of know inside why I'm doing it. I think it's, it's put the middle finger up at cancer kind of thing. But also, I think there is a little bit of ego. You want to test yourself. And I agree, you want to make the people around you proud of you. But again, my family would be like, well, you don't need to do that. Just do the marathon. But so there must be something ego there that pushes you to do the kind of crazy stuff. And I saw on your website, and I wanted to ask you about this as well, that you state that developing mental strength through physical challenges is one of the keys to a successful life. And I, obviously, based on what I've just said, I fully agree. And I just wanted to ask you more about that and your opinions on the overlap.
I think there's a certain amount there's always learning, because the physical challenges that I do have so many different variables, things that I can control, things that I can be geeky about, and then things that are totally outside of it. And then I take time afterwards, and that's why I always write about my challenges, and more recently I make vlogs about them to try and honestly, mate, a lot of that, it sounds bad, but it's for me, but I just put it on my blog because other people. But what that does is it just helps me to reflect, and the reflections that I have, I mean, just after lockdown, we went out to the desert, and we're riding in 54-degree heat, and it was pretty hard. But so that's a physical, and this resonates with me, and I believe that it works for everyone, but not right now. We have to tweak some things, let's say mentally, for it to resonate. But I believe that hard physical scenario, or those hard physical scenarios I'm in, make me stronger when it comes to, like, I've got a problem with an employee. Like, it's easy compared to cycling your bike in 54 degrees, mate. And it's a different type of suffering, but it's mental capacity as well. It's testing my mental capacity, and that's actually why I do a lot of challenges that are not official races, because they're quite easy to quit. So, like, when you're in a race, like, it's quite hard to quit the London Marathon. Like, you'll have thousands of people going, come on, get back in, you can do it. Even if you walk, and you get all this. Whereas we were just 3 guys out in the middle of the desert that day, or 4 guys out in the middle of the desert that day. I could have just said, all right, lads, it's enough.
Yeah.
So, and I think the physicality brings the mental side of it, and the mental side of it passes over. And it also, and this sounds counterintuitive to some people, I know, but it slows you down in certain situations, because you realize that you don't always need to travel at high speed, if that makes sense. You'd come back in, like, in certain situations in work, I could be quite and when I was younger, especially when I used to work for Adidas in my sales career, I think I was quite fiery and stuff. Whereas now and this again might be age, but I think through a lot of the challenges that I've done, because you have to just take time, and it's made me slow down in my business in a healthy way, that I'm comfortable with saying, we'll just leave that for today and come back to it.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean. This is the whole thing about ultra racing. My race is like, the last challenge I did was 24 hours. There's no rush.
Yeah.
There's
What was that challenge? The 24-hour challenge?
We did a race in Italy, which started with a run, 12K run, 15K kayak, 2K swim, some CrossFit workout, 44K bike, another CrossFit workout, marathon row, and then another CrossFit workout.
And you just do that for 24 hours solid?
Yeah, well, they kind of, because they're Italians, they're not very good with timekeeping. Like, there was supposed to be time frames for the event, so you sort of do the ride and then get an hour off, but then they're like, oh no, we need to start this next event, and all of this kind of stuff. But it kind of, I just think these physical challenges, they just teach you in a way that, it goes back to what we're saying about teaching children life skills. Like, if you're willing to do something physical, yes, it proves the physical capacity, but it also proves that, and if you can take it and reflect on it, it proves that you're actually willing to continuously learn. And maybe this is, maybe these challenges, maybe my crash, maybe your illness is your MBA.
Yeah.
People talk about COVID being a free degree. Maybe this is, maybe you and I, maybe you've probably gone back to university as well, because you're a lot smarter than me, but maybe this is what we're supposed to be doing. I don't know.
Yeah. So these extreme challenges, though, you believe that they help individuals grow outside of sport?
Absolutely. It's nothing about, I'm becoming a worse ultra runner, mate.
Yeah.
But I think I'm becoming a better human. I think.
Yeah.
Someone might say I'm not. I don't know.
So the people listening that aren't going to go out and do an endurance event, do you think they can still learn from what you're saying about life?
Yes. I think it'd be very wrong of me to say, unless you're going to do a 24-hour event or go and do something in extreme weather, you won't have a good life. However, I think these things help me, and that's my personality. I'm one human being. I've been brought up the way I think, and they've really helped me. A lot of people will find that they're able to wake up super excited, feeling mentally, physically, and spiritually fantastic without extreme physical suffering, which sounds way better. But I've seen a lot of it as suffering and as hardships. And sometimes the stuff that is harder resonates a bit more. But to answer your question absolutely straight, if you're not into this stuff, I salute you. And if you want to try it, I sort of encourage you to tread with caution. But it really comes back to what I've said a number of times. If you wake up, and this is what I say to people, and often, sadly, the answer is, or the response is not great. But if you wake up and you step out of your bed, and this is every single morning I do this, and again, maybe it sounds a bit ego driven, a bit vain, but step out the bed, the first steps on the floor, how does my body feel? I want it to feel good, because we're designed to feel good. And then, lights on, and I just have a look at myself in the mirror, and some days it's pure flexing, mate. I'll be honest. I'm like, am I happy with how I look? And we, everyone, no one wants to look shit. No one wants to feel shit either. And if the system that you've found is enabling you to put your 2 feet on the floor every morning and feel good, look in the mirror and be proud and actually be super excited about the day, then you have the best system for you.
Yeah.
And I can't argue with it.
Yeah. What has been your most difficult challenge?
physical challenge.
Yeah.
I I think like my ultra challenges, they they're all different. They're not all hard. They're all very different, and a lot of people, they're like, oh, I want to do an extreme or an ultra marathon. What's the hardest? They're as hard as you make them. When I spent in 2015, I ran Marathon des Sables across the Sahara. That's 8 days. That's quite hard,
Yeah.
you know. But I honestly, I think my biggest challenge is really what we've been talking about, is really trying to grow as a human being, being as aware as I possibly can, try to be good to the people around me, and the constant effort to feel great every morning is something that, as you can probably tell, I put a whole heap of emphasis on. And I think as well, we need to stay conscious of the world that we were put in. And, and again, it's a little bit cliched perhaps, but no one's going to remember me in 50 years, and maybe even shorter, I'm probably here for, I like to think I'll live to 100, but I probably won't, mate. I'm here for another 30 to 40 years, and 10 years, 20 years after I'm gone, no one's going to remember me. But if the people that I could interact with, I could leave them with something positive. And it's probably one of your motivations for doing the show. If someone can, and that's what I said when I started my show, I'm like, if one person listens to this and gets a tiny bit better today, then, we've done something.
Yeah, then we're
pretty
winning.
good.
Yeah. So just
I think so, mate.
Take me back to your hardest challenge, so Marathon des Sables.
Yeah.
How do you manage, do you ever have any self-doubt? And how do you manage that? And how do you deal with the pain? Because there is pain. Or is that for a whole nother episode?
I'll answer you straight. Yeah, I have plenty of self-doubt. Plenty. And, in Marathon des Sables, there was times where I was like, and it still happens now, mate. It's like I do multi-stage races. How can I go again tomorrow? But now I'm a lot better equipped to bring that under control, because now, and this is, I think, what I learned a lot in my marathons. It's like tomorrow doesn't matter, because today is what matters, and that's really important, because there's a lot you can do right now to make sure that you feel better tomorrow. So we're often thinking about, okay, how am I going to feel in a week, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks? And we don't go, how am I feeling right now? So yeah, there is a lot of self-doubt there, but there are systems that I've learned. And I think it would be insanely arrogant and a little bit stupid of me to think that I don't have self-doubt. I think self-doubt is a very natural human emotion. And the older I get and the more emotionally aware I get, the more I know that we need to speak and we need to acknowledge these emotions. And sometimes that might be grabbing hold of a friend and saying, mate, I'm absolutely shitting myself about tomorrow. And he might turn around and go, mate, today's today, live, or he might go, oh yeah, I'm really scared as well.
Yeah.
So I think the answer there is, yeah, there's plenty of self-doubt, but there's also confidence. And by doing things, you build that confidence. So by exposing yourself. And I think if you look at your life, no matter who you are, there's some great examples of some insane resilience. Like a lot of people, and you'll resonate with this quite strongly, Emma. I get a lot of ladies postpartum, and they'll come in and are mentally weak. I'm like, you've had 2 children. You are not mentally weak. And it's honestly, and I'm like, I'm not trying to be this super nice guy who's, trying to lift up females or anything. I'm just like, you've given birth twice. You're going to be absolutely fine here.
Yeah. So it's it's basically like reflecting what you've done, isn't it? Reflecting on your accomplishments and saying to yourself, well, I've done that, so I can do that.
100%, mate. And it's, again, if there's two key things that have come from this conversation, it's definitely awareness and reflection. And to create more awareness, you have to have a lot of reflection, but reflection is very hard.
Yeah.
And we could sit and I could say, Sayama, when you were going through chemo, like, what did it really feel like? And that would probably bring a lot of things up, and that is so hard.
Yeah.
And to be vulnerable about it and to be, and then you're going to say things like, I did think about not being here anymore, and that's brutal. And generally people are really uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one of the kickers to my crash is I had a moment where I wasn't here and I was on the other side of the road and I was away from, it was as the truck driver, he got out of his truck and he walked towards me and I was laying on the floor, holding my shoulder, trying to breathe and, people telling me what to do and stuff. And I was in an insane amount of pain and I saw straight through this guy. And even more freakily, the guy was wearing like a Pakistani sort of garb. So he looked like a ghost. And I went straight through him and I was sat on the other side of the road. And I was just sat there looking in sort of a little bit of confusion about what was going on the other side of the road and all this commotion around this guy who'd been like obviously knocked off his bike. And then I realized that was actually me, was my body.
Yeah.
And, again, like, I don't want to freak people out. I don't know what happened. I don't know, that I was actually interviewed on a podcast a couple of months ago and this chick goes, do you know what this is called? And I was like, no. She goes, it's an NDE. And I was like, what's an NDE? And she's like, near-death experience. And so I go home and I start Googling it. I'm like, Holly, you know what happened? It's actually true. And there's a case for it and all of this stuff.
Yeah. But I think the point is it's about processing the trauma. I think that's kind of what you're trying to say, isn't it? Is actually it's got to start with you processing that trauma, reflecting on it, and then you're able to make changes from that. But I mean, that's quite a deep place to finish, but I do need to let you go. I mean, I've learned loads from this conversation and I feel like we could keep going for another hour or so because I've literally got through half my questions, but we will do another one because I've always wanted to speak to an endurance athlete, in all honesty, because I've always been fascinated with how you guys do what you do. But that is for another one where we can get geeky, because I'd quite like to get geeky, like physically. But we can do that another time. But thank you so much. I really do love your positivity, your mindset, your purpose, and I do think this chat will inspire so many people listening. So yeah, really, Marcus, thank you.
I'm sorry, folks, if I've confused you and bounced around, and I just try. It's me. It's what's on my mind and coming out. Some days I articulate it in a way that works. Some days it sounds more confusing. But I think for anyone who is out there who maybe life has given them a couple of lemons, you're not alone, and we all go through it. And like you said, Emma, the reflection, and you'll be able to look back, and you and I can probably look back and cry together, and we could also look back and laugh together about what we've both been through and what everyone's been through. So I think it's perfectly normal, but it's been super awesome, mate. Thank you so much for teeing this up. I love talking, as
Amazing.
You can tell.
Where can people find you, Marcus, if they want to know more?
The best is probably hop over to my Instagram, MJD_Smith, or my blog, mjdsmith.com, and my ramblings are over there. And
brilliant.
If you want to listen to a lot more of my voice, I've got about 850 podcasts on the Inner Fight podcast. So I actually listen on that. I ask questions and then I listen. I do what you've actually done really well. You just let the guest talk and it's really straightforward.
I get the easy job, exactly. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you so much.
Thank you.